My name is Alix Peabody. I was a Dartmouth 12, which is seeming very old all of a sudden. And when I was at Dartmouth, I actually was a double major in computer applied math and creative writing. At the time, I probably thought that I was going to go into finance for the rest of my life because I didn't really realize anything other than that out there. But now I'm the founder of a company called Bev, and we are in the alcohol space, adult beverage space, particularly trying to create products and brands that speak to and speak kindly about women and resonate with women. So that's what I'm up to.
Great, great. So just to sort of rewind it back, it seems like you've had a somewhat unconventional path to this to where you are right now. Me and Mark sort of talked about it. It seems like you've done a lot of different things, including finance, as you mentioned. You even went to film school, it seems. Maybe walk us through a little bit of that and what motivated you along the way, what sort of caused you to maybe change direction, stuff like that.
For sure. So I started off, it's funny because I think that, especially when you're in college and you're kind of seeing the opportunities that are right in front of you. You're seeing campus recruiting and you're maybe tech. And I don't know, when I was at Dartmouth, it was really finance and consulting heavy. And you don't necessarily realize that there are so many different types of industries and roles and opportunities. And the path, I guess, is just never straight, I don't think, especially in entrepreneurship. So, I mean, for me personally, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought in my mind that maybe one day I was going to be, in finance or, I guess in some way, shape, or form, I'd always thought that maybe I wanted to start something, but I didn't really know what that meant. But I did know what I cared about and sort of these recurring themes that kept coming up throughout my life, be it while I was at Dartmouth and then afterwards, and particularly as it pertains to gender dynamics and how men and women interact with each other, particularly when they're drinking or partying or their guards are down or more vulnerable. So that was something that had always interested me, and being able to speak on those topics had always interested me, but I had no idea how that was going to manifest. So when I left Dartmouth, I worked at a hedge fund right after school. I was there for a couple years. And while I was at the hedge fund, I was really, really vocal about getting women maternity leave and helping, the female groups and helping with recruiting and, building out a bigger pipeline of women and that kind of thing. And then after that, I moved out to Silicon Valley, and in my head, I just thought that people started things in Silicon Valley, so maybe I should move there because that's where people start things, and maybe I'll learn how to do it. So fully thought out. But I ended up doing a job, executive recruiting, also because I thought, well, my people will pay me to meet people, and so that seems like a good thing to do when I don't know anyone and I don't know anything about an industry. So I ended up there. Similarly, just the same things that I have always cared about remained things that I cared about, and I had blogs that I would write on and stuff like that. And so at a certain point, I thought that I wanted to actually build the brands that I care about and the mission I care about as a media platform or a media events platform. And so that's actually how I ended up at USC for grad school, was because this kind of recurring theme in my life, I figured maybe the best way to execute it was to really build out a media company. And that's how I ended up in LA at USC.
Do you feel that working in finance or even film helped you in starting Bev, and in what ways did they do that, if so?
Oh, yeah, 100%. So I think that the thing about entrepreneurship that's really interesting is that you have no idea. It's not something you can learn or study, really, right? You just get thrown into the fire, and you learn everything on the job, generally speaking. And even if you've learned it before in some way, shape, or form, when it comes into practice and it's a real thing that you're really dealing with, it becomes a whole different beast. And so I think that like every piece of, you know, knowledge or information or skills that you have and you've picked up along the way are going to be applied in entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is one of the only places I think where you are legitimately firing on all cylinders every single day, using every part of your brain, emotional, you know, mathematical.
Mm-hmm.
It really, everything that you've ever learned, from like, how do I play nice with the playpen, all the way to, you know, how do I read a projection model in a spreadsheet and do a discounted cash flow statement? Like, all of those things are things that you're going to use every single day. And so, you know, I think having gone to USC and film school, I learned a ton about how to tell a story. Mm-hmm. And brands are just that, they're stories, right? So much in life is actually just stories when you boil it down. Mm-hmm. And obviously, having been in finance and at Bridgewater, that was where I was. You know, I learned a lot about just how to handle a spreadsheet and how to read actual finances and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And that's all very useful too, and just like building up the basics on, mm-hmm. you know, how am I gonna spend this money? How am I gonna make money? How long is it gonna last me? Just those types of things.
As you sort of touched on before, one of the common things that we hear from students is sort of consulting, finance, or do a startup or something entrepreneurial. Do you feel that going into finance first is the best way to do it? Do you have any opinions on that?
Do I think going into finance first is the best way to be an entrepreneur?
Or is a good way to do it, maybe?
Prepare.
Yeah, to prepare to be an entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah, to prepare. Oh, God. Nothing's going to prepare you to be an entrepreneur, least of all finance. So, I mean, the best way to prepare to be an entrepreneur is to just start doing it. And because you're just going to fall on your face so many times. You know, it depends who you are, too, right? And how risk-averse you are. And I could tell you the numbers of my business, and I could tell you what I would have projected and what but at the end of the day, frankly, if you want to be an entrepreneur, the best preparation you can have is sales. Mm-hmm. It is not finance or anything else. Mm-hmm. As an entrepreneur, you have to recruit people, which is a form of sales. You have to fundraise, generally speaking, which is a huge form of sales. You know, you have to actually sell your product when there's nobody to do it but you at the beginning. And it's just a lot of, you know, getting people aligned with your vision, which in many ways, I wish someone had told me that, like, learn how to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that, so any aspects of those skills that you mentioned, so focusing on like sales and so just dealing with people, would you say that any of that had to do with perhaps your time at Dartmouth, maybe some clubs or even a sorority or, you know, classes that you're a part of?
Yeah, so the question is, how did my time at Dartmouth prepare me for that?
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, I work in the alcohol industry, so so Dartmouth prepared me in many ways. But I think, I think that college in general and, you know, growing up in general prepares you in the sense of, first of all, those relationships are really valuable, right? And, you know, if you have a choice between studying up and having an interesting conversation with someone and making a deep connection with somebody on campus, like, do the latter. Mm-hmm. Who cares about the test? I mean, sorry, I didn't say that. But anyway, you know, I think that the relationships that you build are just end up being the groundwork that you lay for, you know, your network and who you're going to become, and how you treat those people is so important. And I think oftentimes, you know, even at Dartmouth, I'm sure I fell into this trap by accident. It's easy to get so caught up in your sorority or your frat or your club or your day-to-day, whatever, and people can forget how genuinely important it is to just reach out to that person who maybe doesn't have as many friends as you, and to just, you know, be extra kind to people and take time for people. College is a place where you can do that. And I think that the more you learn to do that and just make sure that the thing that people will have to say about you at the, if nothing else, it's just she was a nice girl, like that was a nice guy, is really important. I know it sounds really kind of hokey, but I think so much of building companies is, relationships and people trusting you. And in many ways, when people come to work for you, right, they're trusting you like with their livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
It's what they're doing all day, every day. And so I think it's just learning to build those bonds and trust early, and learning to do it outside of your comfort zone, even more than inside, is something that I think is really important. I wasn't in a sorority at Dartmouth, and so that was actually hard for me at the beginning because, I wasn't in one, and so I didn't have a built-in group,
Mm-hmm.
I had to go find it myself, forage friends, if you will. And I think that's something that's really important. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I guess coming out of Dartmouth, then, would you say that you were, I guess, just digging deeper into this fact, did you see yourself going in any direction related to entrepreneurship, specifically food and beverage, right? Because it's a very niche and growing part of the entrepreneurship landscape. It's definitely not maybe as well known as maybe like Facebook and big tech, but just as important.
Mm-hmm.
So could you touch on that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely didn't. I never in a million years would have guessed that I would have been in food and beverage. I hate cooking. I don't really. I'm not a huge fan of food. I'm not like a craft wine spirits person. I'm frankly, I don't necessarily even drink that much. So that was definitely not something that I thought that I would ever do in a million years. I think the thing that landed me here was just following why I wanted to build something more than what it was on a literal level of what I wanted to build, right? And so for me, I wanted to build a company that addressed the things that I had mentioned, gender dynamics and female empowerment and how those things relate when people are in more casual social settings.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I just kind of followed that until I realized pretty by accident that there was an entire industry that, that everyone interacted with. It's in every, frat basement. It's in every bar. It's at every party that has completely and utterly disregarded women for centuries.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is crazy when you think about it, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, I kind of landed there. But once I realized that, because of the mission of what I want to do, once I realized that, I was like, this is where I have to do it. Mm-hmm. But I think the thing that you raised also is pretty interesting too, because I think there's a big shift right now. And when you say like the entrepreneurship landscape, I think that's funny because that's almost like not a thing, right? It's like any landscape that exists is a place where an entrepreneur can start something, right? And so, there's far fewer. Food and beverage is definitely up and coming, but in some of these like stodgier, older industries, like think of transportation, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's like the most obvious one, where the unsexier the industry and the unsexier and the more difficult and the more antiquated, the more room there is for something new and really, really disruptive. And so I think it's a pretty interesting time to be looking at starting a company in general because the rules are just out the window.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Could you speak a little bit more on the social impact piece of Bev and how that sort of aligns with your goals of female empowerment, but also how it fits into your business model and running your business?
Yeah, for sure. So there are a few things. Where would I even begin? So, I mean, the first and foremost thing is, Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's going to take a long time, right? And building these things over time takes money. And so, we start small and we do little things like try to make sure that all of our imagery is, created with a positive intent for women. We have stories like Not Okay Wednesday on Wednesdays where we post things about, ads that we see that are, quote, like just not okay, and Break the Glass Tuesdays. And there's kind of like those little things that we do. And then from a more marketing perspective and how we align, then we have specific groups and types of events that we will support, types of, maybe if it's the Female Entrepreneurship Conference or something like that, female artists we try to align with, that kind of thing, which I think is really important. But that's kind of like what we're doing today. What we want to do over time, is build that more and more and be able to build something where, for example, we have a Coachella activation this weekend and we have a safe zone for women, and you can go in and you can get your, sunscreen and tampons and whatever. And it's just like a female place to just kind of get away and feel calm and safe and taken care of. And so that those types of things I think are going to be bigger and bigger as we grow. And then obviously from a product perspective, I really want us to build out different types of products for different use cases. So maybe that means alcohol, maybe that doesn't. And so thinking about that and what our consumer actually wants to be drinking when she's in those situations. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, definitely. So would you say then you feel the future of Bev is in sort of getting new product lines out to market, or do you have other bigger plans? Or?
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, we will see. I'd love to build a Bev empire over time, for sure. I'd love to build. I'd love to have a media house side of the house, not dissimilar to say like a Red Bull model, if we can. Product extensions are definitely something that are in the works, but I think it's going to be so important that we're just extremely adamant about our brand, and our slogan is Break the Glass, and so that gives us a lot of room to build a lot of things over time, right? And that's something that we keep in mind, and we're constantly trying to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. So I was actually reading an article up about Bev and sort of your founding of it. I found it to be like an incredibly interesting story. So could you talk a little bit about that? How did you get Bev started? What inspired you to start it? Maybe a little bit of the funding and financing of it. So in that regard.
Sure. So sort of how did this all happen?
Yeah.
Was that the question? So I started the company, realistically, it was about a year and a half ago, but like I said, there's kind of been a recurring thing in my life over and over again. Frankly, that probably started as a little bit of Dartmouth, right? And the frat scene and having it be so male-centric and male-dominated. When you think about it, when a woman walks in to a social space that is not owned by her, it has a lot of implications on the psychology of how you feel walking into that room, whether you feel you're welcome, what you feel you should wear, like these types of things. And these were things that had always kind of registered with me. And I think it was a Dartmouth and then sort of the New York bratty finance scene afterwards, and then like Silicon Valley and tech. It was kind of just the same recurring theme over and over again, which I think speaks more about the industry of socializing and going out and partying than does about any one place, right? And just kind of how so many of those spaces tend to be super male dominated. But anyway, so I'll say, I was living in San Francisco. I actually got sick. Is this what you read about?
Yes.
Yeah. So I actually got sick. I went into reproductive organ failure. I lost my right ovary after 6 surgeries in 18 months. And it was a huge bummer. But I basically was trying to figure out how I was going to raise money to pay, first of all, for my medical bills, and then also to freeze eggs in a very, very short window of time. And I was 24, I guess, so, still pretty young. And I just started, so I started throwing parties, actually, at my aunt and uncle's house. And my aunt is also a Dartmouth grad. She's awesome. And I was throwing these parties for over the summer. And I loved them, A, because it was just, obviously it was really fun, and B, because I felt that the energy of a female-owned social space was so different. And I kind of joke to people, you've probably never been to a party thrown by your, chick friends that doesn't at least have snacks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas,
for sure.
Most of your, like, I don't know, just mass generalization, but kind of kidding, but also kind of not, right? And so they tend to be more thoughtful, a little bit more responsible, et cetera. And so I really got addicted to that energy, and that's kind of how, in my mind, it started, and the brand started, rather, where I was like, how can I do this? How can I take this energy and scale it? And how can I make, this female empowerment feminist thing also fun and approachable in a big way, right? So that was kind of how it originally started. I moved down, so that's when I said that I thought that I wanted to build a media company. That's what I had set it out to do when I moved to Los Angeles and went to USC. And then when I got down here, I basically started to realize that I needed to have it tied to some sort of product if I really wanted to have a lasting impact and have some staying power as a brand. And so that's when I started looking at various industries and landed on alcohol. In terms of how I funded it, because I moved, I guess there was some sort of notification on a 401k that I totally forgot I had. For anyone graduating from college who's listening to this, on your first day of work, they will give you a shitload of paperwork, and you have no idea what it is. If there's anything that says 401k or IRA on it, just max it out. Just choose to max out every paycheck to that random account. But that's what I did without realizing that that's what I had done. And so they sent me a notification that changed my address, and I realized that I had this small amount of money left over from when I filled out paperwork on that first day of work at Bridgewater. And so I cashed the whole thing to buy our first round of product. Wow. Yeah, that's the super early days.
It's incredible.
Yeah. How did you move forward with fundraising from there? Was it a VC or totally bootstrapped?
Yeah, so originally, no, it was definitely not bootstrapped. This is one of the things that is tough, I will say, about food and beverage, specifically alcoholic beverage, because of the laws, because you need distribution and all this stuff. It's very capital intensive. It's really hard to bootstrap because you need to hit certain minimums just to even make any product at all. But I basically took that first round of product and I brought it around to parties where I knew angel investors or friends of friends who were in the VC world or whatever were going to, and I would flood those parties with product, and then a couple days later I would get an introduction to one of the investors, and they would be like, "Oh my God, your stuff is everywhere!"
Wow,
like that's crazy, but really, I just put it there. So that was kind of how it started. Really early days, and we raised a round of pre-seed financing, and we have a very exciting fundraising announcement coming out next week.
That's awesome.
Stay tuned for
Congrats.
that.
To hear it. I guess just as a closing question, if you're wondering if you could sort of speak to the college undergraduates, do you have any important advice, whether it's about entrepreneurship, how to be a good entrepreneur, or just more in general, right? Just about being a person, or maybe coming out of college and growing
and enjoying Dartmouth and making the best of it.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. So let's see. What's my favorite tidbit for the moment? I think it's so important to remember, like I said earlier, to be kind to people, and to be kind to people when you're in school is so important. The way that you treat people, the relationships that you have and you build, and the ones that you destroy follow you. And when you're at a place like Dartmouth, people are going to go on to do extraordinary things. And, that's not the reason that you should be nice to people. You should be nice to people in general. But people remember, being slighted for this thing or that thing. They remember how it felt to be hurt or, turned away from a door or something like that, right? So I think that that's just something that's really important to stress when you're out and you're partying and you're having realize necessarily the impact of your actions. Just think about who you want to be in the long term, and think about it today. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important because it does follow you. And then the other thing I'd say is kind of to that extent, but also I guess kind of different, is when you're graduating from Dartmouth, so many people are going to be doing such similar things like consulting or finance or tech. I would imagine are probably the big three. Mm-hmm. And it's going to feel like if you're not doing that job, you're not doing a job. You didn't get a job. Yeah. It is a really, really big world out there. And the best job that I ever had or ever took, the job with the biggest payout, was being a recruiter, right? Which at the time I'd left Bridgewater to go be a recruiter. Like everyone thought I was crazy, right? And and people literally said to me, "Well, isn't that going to be, a step down in your career?" And I was like, I'm not thinking about it that way. I'm thinking about it as like, I'm going to meet a ton of people. I'm going to be really well networked in Silicon Valley, and I'm going to learn a lot about what it means to build teams. Mm-hmm. And in that situation, I cared more about what I was going to learn than the stamp it was going to give me on my resume. Mm-hmm. And it was by far the best job I ever could have done in order to later be an entrepreneur, because I learned how to recruit. I met everyone because I recruited people for all the big venture firms. So I interacted with, Sequoia and Andreessen and all of these places before, helping staff their portfolio companies. And so anyway, so I think that's the other thing too, is follow where you think you're really going to learn the most, and rather than just getting really blinded by, by corporate recruiting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. It's been really interesting.
Thank you guys.
And it's a pleasure to hear about your company. It sounds awesome. And we'll be sure to plug it to our audience and to campus.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, only to those who are over 21.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah. We'd expect nothing less. Yep.
Thanks.